Exactly 10 years ago, I quit my extremely well-paid job because of this agreement. A few days ago, my boss approached me and asked if I could leak this sensitive document. And I ask you out there, please watch this video all the way to the end. It's about Mercosur and why there's much more behind it than we all think. These are the farmers' foods that we should be consuming here in Germany. And let me briefly explain a story to you in advance why I'm so defensive and why I'm declaring this as an absolute special broadcast. I remember it just like it was today. Back then, I was sitting at the table with my brother-in-law and we were having a barbecue with the family. And on that day, I had even spoken positively about Mercosur because I knew exactly that the commissions were extremely high. And back then, my brother-in-law said to me, "You can't be serious. Do you even know how the farmers back there live? I just showed you the pictures." I said, "No, why? Honestly, I don't really care. I can just buy other groceries." And then he stood up and said, "You're the worst and I will never talk to you again." It took 5 years before I had contact with my brother-in-law again, who had realized my mistake. Shortly after that, I quit the company and said that I could no longer reconcile it with my conscience in any way. And even if that would bring billions to my company by now, I would not take that step again. At that time, I resigned.
Fires and riots in Brussels. Farmers are protesting against the free trade agreement between the European Union and the South American Mercosur countries.
In these images here on Twitter, you can see Dutch police officers going after farmers with their guns drawn.
Exactly 4 years separate these images when police officers, I really have to say it, even shot at farmers because they were protesting, because the agricultural sector is only one part. At least 99,000 tons of meat are supposed to come into the European Union, which will initially come in quite cheaply, but because you can then increase that, more rainforests can be cleared for, among other things, animal production. And I have to say, for, among other things, food that is so extremely contaminated with pollutants on the one hand and on the other hand. And what's even worse is that they're really stored under absolutely the lowest, dirtiest conditions, only to be cleanly packaged afterwards and sent to Germany or the European Union. I'll show you a clip now, but it's out of context. The first video I uploaded to show you what it really looks like back there in Brazil was immediately restricted. That means I had to take it down.
Why is that so bad?
The smuggling.
Why?
It's so exhausting.
And now it should be clear to everyone why the right-wing, left-wing and Green parties voted together in the European Union Parliament against the Christian Democratic Union and Social Democratic Party. Why you shouldn't follow von der Leyen's path. And who would have thought, let's just lower the environmental standards a bit more. Do you actually know what's extremely abundant in Mercosur, like what there's really a lot of there? Yes. Who would have thought lithium, rare earths? Lithium can be mined wonderfully back there. And since we're being denied access to markets, for example, in Greenland or Ukraine, people thought, well, let's go for Mercosur now and flood it with all of them. I'll just say some of what comes there is basically toxic waste, simply the German market.
Global demand for Brazilian beef and soy is a main cause of rainforest destruction. Agricultural land is often made by slash and burn clearing.
Here they tell us that we shouldn't build any more nuclear power plants and that we should reduce our CO2 footprint. Taxes are constantly increasing, especially on things like diesel, gasoline, or even electricity. The tax burden is growing tremendously. To simply move what could actually be produced much more cheaply here abroad, that's not clever. Is that the European Union's suicide, what they're planning there? Or has no one asked why it took 25 years to reach a Mercosur agreement? All the reports I've shown you are from the past 10 years, which have always encouraged me to fight against this agreement. And what she's getting now, that's the last straw.
Thanks for advertising, but also for the use of growth-promoting hormones. That's allowed in South America.
I'll quickly translate what he just said. In theory, you could, or it has already happened, conduct research with chemicals to see how people here react to them. Because that's not allowed yet and it can't be imported either, but that's exactly what would happen, because no one would be checking anymore. It's called a free trade agreement for a reason. And what he just mentioned is simply genetically modified meat. No one knows what will come to Europe and how people will react to it. So you are supposed to become a test subject later, because the meat only costs a fraction of what, for example, farmers here can produce. Whether that's healthy for you or if you'll grow a third arm afterwards, no one really knows for sure. Because over there the standards just aren't high enough for anything to really be checked. Which again basically means a death sentence for the German economy, especially for the German Farmers Association. Why? Well, when a normal family goes shopping and sees a piece of meat in the refrigerated section for 41 euros and sees the same piece of meat for 9 euros. What do you think? Will the family with 3 children choose the expensive meat just to eat healthy? Or are they now forced with these prices to simply take the cheaper piece of meat?
Where cattle now graze, there was rainforest 10-30 years ago.
If they've already gone to so much trouble for cattle, now let me explain something to you. Among other things, something we all know right now. Argentina has a gigantic supply of lithium resources. But what you probably didn't know yet, and now think about Greenland or even Ukraine, where there are wars over this. For example, in Brazil, there are the so-called magnetic metals which are needed for neodymium. I'll read this to you now because I actually did a whole research on it, but I'll also link it for you down below later. You can read it for yourselves then. Then there are other rare earths like lanthanum or cerium, for example, for batteries for extremely large lithium-ion storage units. And of course also rare earths that we absolutely need. For the whole high-tech sector, for example, for chips that are being produced. Now think about why the war has been raging in Ukraine for so long, why Donald Trump absolutely wants to end this war, and why he is obviously taking action against Greenland. What do you think? Why should there be more courses? This is about going even further, cutting down the rainforest, burning it down with slash and burn. And well, our farmers, they're simply just victims of globalization, victims of high-tech developments. Instead of, for example, going to Greenland to extract them or finally making peace with Ukraine, that's the only reason why Europe doesn't abandon Ukraine and why we pour so much money into Ukraine.